Well, in today's session, we're going to be talking about 3 different levels of a chord melody arrangement of the song Kids by MGMT. We actually have a tutorial of this that's coming out very soon, so stay tuned. And if you're watching this as a recording, check out the link down below where you can probably see how to learn how to play this song yourself. Now, we want to break down a little bit of what chord melody means. And what it is essentially taking all of the different pieces of a song, which are melody, harmony, and rhythm, which we've done a few videos on these concepts before. But it's taking all those pieces and trying to do them all at the same time on the ukulele. And what we're going to be focusing on today is the riff from the song Kids. And the riff, which is the melody, basically, sounds something like this. It goes... right? That's our whole sort of riff. And now what I'm doing right here is I'm just playing the melody of that riff, right? And now there's also a rhythm to it for sure, but there's a big piece missing, and that is the harmony. Now, the most common form of harmony that we see in songs and that we hear is chords. And the chords to this are pretty simple, actually. In fact, you can kind of play along the chords if you want. They're E minor to C to G to D, right? Now these chords are going to take place within this melody, and what we have to do is we have to kind of layer it all together to make it into that chord melody. The big trick to doing this on the ukulele really well and proficiently is to make sure that the melody note is highlighted and brought forward, and that the chords are just there to kind of balance it and provide some kind of context and reinforcement. You can think of it sort of like if you're watching a movie, the characters of the movie are the melody, and the set, the backdrop, is the harmony, right? You don't want the harmony necessarily to be the focal point, but it can provide some nice context for the characters. So now I'm going to make the first level here, which is just the most basic of basic chord melody. I'm going to play that melody I just did on the riff, and I'm going to stack the chords in underneath it at the time of changes so that we get this very basic chord melody arrangement of this riff. It sounds something like this. And you can hear that's our level 1. It's fulfilling all of the roles of chord melody where we have that melody and that harmony kind of intermixed and intertwined, and it sounds pretty nice. In fact, when I perform this song, I oftentimes will start with really basic levels like this to just, kind of illustrate that melody going through. But level 1 does get a little bit boring eventually. So what we're going to talk about with level 2 is fingerstyle. What we're going to do is we're going to take our playing hand and we're going to incorporate some finger picking to fill out some of the space that exists as we're playing this melody. Now, I'm using 4-finger picking for this right now. We'll probably link down below a video to some 4-finger picking stuff if you want to work on it some. But with this 4-finger picking, it allows me to play melody notes and harmony notes more, interlaced with each other, right? We can actually really have these melody notes kind of featured with these harmony notes all kind of going underneath. When I was just strumming through for the chord melody there, like this, it's just kind of playing the chords at the moments they're needed, right? Now with finger picking, I can do something more like this. So what I'm doing here is my left hand's very much doing the same stuff. The left hand established our sense of melody, and it also established our sense of harmony with these chords, right? Now, all that I'm doing to create this richer level is I'm layering in this finger picking style. But the real key importance here is the dynamics between the melody notes and the non-melody notes. So let me kind of show you what I mean by this. If I play it like this, does this sound very good? That was not very good, was it? Right? Why? Why was that not very good compared to the first time I did it? Well, the answer is because I'm not creating any sort of depth with my sense of harmony and my sense of melody. It's sort of like if you're watching a movie, we go back to that like backdrop versus characters. If the action is happening behind the characters more than it's happening with the characters that you're watching, it becomes very distracting to watch that, isn't it? Right? So it's really, really important that those characters are front and center as you go through. So I'm going to play it again, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to prioritize the melody notes. The notes that are this are going to be played louder, while all the backdrop is played much softer. It sounds like this. See how much nicer that is? That's because, again, the characters, our melody, is very much prioritized as I'm going through. P. Cash says, you make it sound pretty good to me. Yeah, you know, it's amazing, though, how big of a difference it makes, though, to have that melody being featured as you're playing through. Now, as far as what I'm sort of selecting for picking, I can do really simple things with this. I'm actually kind of picking the melody note with a you know, kind of a single string or a couple strings like this. The very first note I'm playing, instead of just the G note here, the 3 on the E, I'm playing the E note with it. And then when I play like the A string, I'm playing that alone, but then there's a little bit of space that's existing. So what I do is I kind of play my open G string, especially as a high G ukulele in this case. It sounds really nice to kind of bounce off of. And then as I'm going through, whenever there's more space, I just kind of play more finger picking fills. And what's fun is my finger picking fill default is actually pretty simple. I just kind of go G, C, E, A and repeat that for whatever I have for time. So when I'm starting this, it uses a lot of just the G, because that's all I have time for. But as it goes through, you can hear I start using a little bit more. And then when it has lots of space, like on this, that G chord kind of plays through because the melody goes, just sits there for a while, right? Instead of just playing the G and letting it ring, I'm going to play the melody and just kind of pick G, C, E, A, G, C, E, A to fill that space. And same thing with the next part. It's just filling that space that exists. So here it is again, just so you can hear it now with that sort of context. Melody being featured, using the strings of the ukulele to kind of fill in the gaps. And when there's more of a gap to fill, I just play a few more notes. Sounds something like this. Pretty cool, right? So that's sort of our level 2 of this arrangement. It's using finger picking and that sort of fingerstyle sound to create this much, much richer arrangement. And just to kind of show it again, here's what the bass level is, right? The bass level chord melody. The level 2 now. Now, here's going to be the level 3, which to me is very much ukulele. Sounds something like this. Right? What I'm adding here for the level 3 is strumming. And I'm kind of using some hybrid strumming picking concepts. And we're going to break all that down here today. But I think that that's such a natural development, right? It becomes a little bit more intense, a little bit more sound. Strumming naturally, because of the pulse it's creating, just sounds fuller than finger picking, or at least more vibrant, right? There's a lot more activity. And so what I do is nothing different with the left hand, right? The left hand is still playing those same sort of chords and melody notes. But rather, again, my right hand is starting to do some really different, intricate stuff. In fact, P. Cash says, man, that sounds great with the strumming and ghost note. And you're exactly right. Ghost note strumming is a big feature with this to create this sort of sound. Now, it's fun because all that I'm doing is the same stuff with the left hand. I'm just adding a little bit more with the playing hand, right? Fretting hand is just playing the same stuff. Now, in this particular case, the melody note plays off the E string quite a bit, right? And whenever you have a melody note on an E string, it can be very difficult to strum and get it to really sound like it pops, because as soon as I strum through the chord, it's going to be the A string that comes most forward. So what I do is this little hybrid picking strumming technique. I take my index finger and I actually put it right here between the E and the A strings. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pluck up, kind of hooking that E string mostly. And then I'm going to alternate this with a ghost note, with my thumb here on the G string. And I'm going to just go all the way up for this melody. Now, the funny thing about this is my rhythm is actually all kind of off. Normally, downstrokes are downbeats and upstrokes are offbeats. But the melody here is on the downbeats. And I kind of have to come up with the index to get it. So I'm reversing everything, which makes it more intricate. And that's why this is that third level. So I'm playing up with my index, ghost note, which is just the thumb hitting the G string. And that's the whole first line. Now it's exactly the same as this. For this hand, it's exactly the same as this. Right? But adding that level of intricacy. Now, after I do that, the melody's mostly on the A string from here. So I can actually switch to normal strumming if I'd like to with the C chord. Right? As I go through. But I have to use this on that first section because of that E melody note. I use that technique whenever I need that melody note to kind of go in with the E string, right? I'll also use it on the A frequently, right? I mean, with this, a lot of those melody notes are on the A string and kind of stick with it because it allows that melody note to kind of come forward. And this is what makes this level 3 pretty intricate, is I'm kind of switching between this being my downbeat, despite being my up strum, and this being my downbeat with my down strum, which is kind of tricky, but creates some really cool sounds. So here's what it sounds like using this. Go ahead and watch my hand, watch how it keeps a somewhat consistent pulse that then will change every once in a while. The sense of up versus down sounds something like this. From here, you can start doing things like adding double time strumming. And you could even strum the whole thing if you want, which I know this is kind of a bonus to this level 3. But what if I want to keep the strum pattern going with it? Well, I totally can. What I'm going to do here is take my index finger and I'm going to mute the A string. So now if I do a down strum, your sense of melody here is the 3 on the E. And now I could keep the hand strumming consistent the whole way through. I don't have to do that kind of up strum. And that can allow me to be even more intricate with my strumming. Something like this. And now you can hear that now this strumming, this third level is really intense. And what's cool is, shoehorning it into the 3 levels is, it makes for a good video title, but what you'll realize is that the reality is that those 3 things have the steps between as well, right? This third level is mostly strumming, the second level is mostly picking, and the first level was just the basic chord melody. But there's bridges between each one of these gaps, and that's where the magic really happens with arranging, is when you start to find those little spaces in between. So just to kind of show you, I'm going to play level 1, and instead of just jumping to level 2, I'm going to add some elements of level 2. So level 1 was just going through like this, right? And level 2 was adding some picking. So I'm going to add some picking and then go into lots of picking. So level 1 to 2 is going to be a little bit more gradual. Then you'll hear when I'm in level 2, it'll be pretty obvious that I'm finger picking it. And I'm going to transition into level 3. So I'll use some strumming elements within the picking, and then from there I'll get to kind of the end of level 3, super, strumming. And so this going through might sound something like this. Now we're in level 2, right? Now we're really getting into that level 3. And you can hear that it's all based on that very simple melody that's just played over and over with the harmony layered in, the finger picking, the strumming going through to create all of these different sounds. And so there's the 3 levels of this kids riff intro on the ukulele, starting with just basic chord melody, which layers together chords and melody together. The second layer using finger picking, that sort of 4-finger picking method's what I'm using to fill in some of the spaces. And then the third level using strumming, something very unique to the ukulele that can really elevate it, make it sound different than it would on something like a guitar or another instrument. So if you have any questions and you're watching this live, feel free to start commenting with them. I see a couple questions I'll start answering here. If you're watching this as a recording, every single month we do a live lesson here on Rock Class 101. Right now we're doing it on Saturday morning. However, starting next month, we're going to be doing it on a new time. So stay tuned for that. But there's always a post that you can ask your questions to see them answered as well. But let's go ahead and look at some of the questions here. Zill says, when you write an original tune, do you start with the melody and fill it in, or write it together, or start with the chords and build a melody on top? I love this question. And the answer to it, it actually ties back to the analogy I was making just a moment ago. The difference between kind of the backdrop, which is of a movie, like the set of a movie, and the characters that are in the movie. Well, some movies are written around the characters first, and then the set kind of is made from that. But other movies, the set is kind of made first, right? When you're thinking about a movie like Star Wars, or you're thinking about any sort of high fantasy thing, usually the realm, the world is kind of built first, and then characters are crafted to fit within that context, right? And that's a great way of creating. But at the same time, some of the best characters ever in literature or in movies or whatever, it almost doesn't matter what they're doing. It's just the person themselves, the character that is so interesting. So sometimes I write a song that's melody driven, character driven, and then I create a set or the harmony to kind of reflect what I want those characters to be going in with, right? What I want them to be going through. But then there are other times where I want to create the set. I want to create this world and then find characters that fit that mold. So the answer is I do it both ways. I will sometimes find a melody, I'll sometimes find chords, and I'll just try to fit something together that works. There's not one right way to do it, just like there's not one correct way to create a story based on the environment or the characters, right? So then Pcash says, did Jake S use the same technique of adding levels in Guitar Gently Weeps? Very much so. Yeah, exactly. We actually did a live lesson here on Gently Weeps, which is, I think, my favorite lesson I've ever done, live lesson here. And it's the same left hand stuff taking place. Right? That's more of a finger picking. I could do something in between. I could also go really ham with it. Right? Can really go crazy. Left hand, or in my case, left hand, the fretting hand is exactly the same, and the playing hand is what changes to create that depth. Jake very much pioneered that mindset, and it's very effective. Connie says, this will be really nice accompanying lesson to review when the song lesson comes out. Yeah, that's my hope too. The song lesson is not as intricate as the crazy strumming that's done here, but you can start to see how that crazy strumming can be unlocked by learning the tab and learning some of the stuff. And the song lesson does go into a little bit of how you can choose whether to pick or strum as you go through. Pcash says, when picking filler notes, will any string sound good, or do you have to know the actual note? That's a really great question. So what I think this question means is when I'm playing this melody here, let's say right here, this melody note, there's lots of space that exists after it, right? Because it just plays this 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, lots of space. So will any filler note work? Well, the answer is not any note will work, right? We got to make sure it has some context to the song. And so what you want to default to are what are called chord tones. And all that is whatever the chord is that's being played, the notes of that chord. In the case of this B note, the chord is a G chord. So if you play this B note and then you just play the notes of a G chord, it's going to sound nice. Now what's cool is it doesn't matter what order you play these notes in or what context. So if I go, or I go, it doesn't matter, right? I could play them in any order, in any different sequence, and it can sound nice. Now, what if I do it in a sequence and it doesn't sound nice? Well, that means it doesn't sound nice, and you want to find one that does. The golden rule of arranging is if it sounds good, you're doing it right. If it sounds bad, something's up, right? And so it doesn't matter, if I tell you to do this and it doesn't sound good, you got to find something that does. But you can just kind of pick through the strings in any way with the chord. You can also use some of the scale tones. I really like to play this G sus2 chord with this A melody note. Now that A note is in the key of E minor, but I just like that sound. The theory almost doesn't matter, right? It's just, oh, that sounds good. I'm going to try it. I can try all sorts of things. Does this C sharp note sound good? Not quite, so I'm not going to use that one, right? But maybe the C. Wasn't crazy about that. This is sort of the process, right? You kind of find little things, start with the chord tones, and then kind of branch out. So the Bumble Bard, that's a great screen name. Hello, great lesson. Can you talk about doing things like pull-offs, hammer-ons, trills while finger picking, especially pull-offs? Literally, how do you do them? ... LOL. Awesome. Yeah, so there is a video that we did on hammer-ons and pull-offs. I still will, show how to do some of this. That's definitely something to add to these layers as well, and something that I like to do. In this particular case, I focused more on the playing hand difference, but you'll notice that I really did like doing this. I really like that little hammer on there, right? And so when you're playing this stuff, especially pull-offs, the trick to doing a good pull-off, a little exercise for you all. Take your ring finger, place it on the 5th fret of the A string. Take your index finger, place it on the 3rd fret of the A string. So they're both on the same string. Now what you're going to do is you're going to play this string, And then with your ring finger here, you are going to pull it off, and you're not going to pull it off like this. You see how that's just removing it. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually pluck the string. My ring finger is going to bend the string down. I'm using the strength of this first knuckle here, holding the index right where it is. I'm going to physically pluck the string. Pull-offs are actually the easier thing to do when you get comfortable with this technique because you can create sound with it. You can hear how it's actually physically plucking it. Pretty cool. If you want more help with hammer-ons and pull-offs, I'm sure if you're watching this as a recording, we'll have a link down below on the embellishments, or quick YouTube search Rock Class 101 embellishment techniques. I'm sure lots of things will pop up as well. Pcash says, good to know, thank you. I'm assuming that's with the filler stuff. Awesome, I'm glad that worked out. Still says, when you're choosing the filler notes, do you always play the same ones and memorize that, or do you improvise on the chord? That's another great question. It's kind of almost a little of both. So sometimes the filler is so important to be consistent to the song just because it sounds good that way that I memorize exactly what I'm doing. Other times I just wing it, but I wing it in the same ways. What you'll notice is if you listen to me do an arrangement of one song and then another song and another song, you'll be able to find these common ties through all of them because I have tendencies, right? Things that come intuitively to me based on the things I've worked on in the past will happen with the arranging. And so I will do certain things frequently with my arrangements. And if an arrangement comes along that doesn't let me do what comes intuitively, it becomes much more difficult to work on. And that's when I know it's a good one to practice to break some of the tendencies I might have with my playing. So I really like, for instance, doing the G, C, E, A filler. It's very simple. And with my high G ukulele, it creates this nice, kind of bouncing effect because it's not going just straight down to up. So when I pick up a low G and I start playing, I start doing this, it becomes a little too boring for me because it's now going G, C, E, A, low to high. And I'll have to kind of mix it up or something. So yeah, some improvised things, but mostly, tendencies is what I'd say. Things that I frequently do will happen in songs when I'm trying to improvise them. Otherwise, I will memorize it if the song really wants it. Pcash says, I know you mentioned before you like the use of picking with the thumb using rear stroke. I think rest stroke is what meant to be said there. Could you demonstrate that for this song you are demonstrating? Oh, and then corrected yourself there on rest stroke. Yeah, so I just made a video on my channel. My name's Matt Dahlberg. If you look me up on YouTube, you'll be able to find that video. What I do at the beginning of the song when I'm playing just the very core chord melody, my thumb is strumming through this E minor, getting this G melody note. Now, to get this G melody note correctly, I use a technique that's called the rest stroke. That means my thumb is going to strum through my G, C, and E strings, and as it strums through each string, you see that I sort of stop on the next string. The reason this is so important is because my melody note is here, this G note on the E string. And by wedging my thumb on the A string like this, I'm able to actually get that chord and that melody to sound really firm and, controlled. Because if I go like this and try to just hit those strings kind of willy-nilly with the finger, I might hit something else. My finger is erratic. It's not working very well. So the rest stroke is stopping, resting on the string that you're stopping on. The rest stroke really works well when that melody note is on the E string. And you'll see that I use that to kind of stop. That's that thumb picking style, that more melodic picking that's really effective as you're playing through that first level, really, of the chord melody. Funny enough, though, just because something's the first level doesn't mean it's the worst level, right? You don't need a finger pick and then strum, and strumming like is, the end all. No, each one has its own sort of purpose, right? If I'm playing this as a ballad, I'm going to use a lot more of that thumb melodic style and finger picking than I would strumming, right? So it just depends the type of sound and vibe you want to create. I also think that rest stroke and the melodic style with the thumb is some of the hardest to make sound really good. So I really enjoy working with it because it's all about that tone and control and all that good stuff. So I'm going to check on the forum. As I mentioned before, every time with these live lessons, there is a forum post that's made on Rock Class 101. So if you are unable to catch these live, you can leave a comment there, and I'll be sure to answer any questions you might have. When I looked at it earlier, it didn't look like there were any questions, and I don't think there are any yet, which is totally cool. But if you ever want to see your question answered, that's the best way to do it. I also don't see any new questions in the chat. I'll give it just a moment here. Just to kind of recap, we worked on 3 different levels of the intro to the song Kids, which is a lesson that will be available here on Rock Class 101 very soon. The first one was just playing the chord melody, playing the chord and the melody together. To play this, I used my thumb. Very simply, right? The next level was finger picking, in this case using 4-finger picking to add some filler between the notes. And then the next one after that was more strumming based. Same sort of stuff with the fretting hand the whole way, just using these different techniques with the playing hand to create this sound. And so I got one more question here from Pcash. How would you embellish the Willy Wonka song you taught yesterday? Yeah, so we did Pure Imagination very recently, which was a really fun one to work out. And to answer that question, we actually aren't going to want to necessarily use a lot of these embellishments with it. You'll notice they don't sound great. This is a perfect example of a question of where the first level can oftentimes be the best. So I'm going to play a little bit of it. Sounds something like this going through. If you'd like to learn this, it's available here. Have to remember how to play it. Now, there's a lot of space here, but you notice I'm using that melodic style. I think it just sounds so rich and nice for this song. If I finger pick it, it might be like this. Now, there's some niceness to that for sure, but I think it's better when the picking is kind of added within the melodic picking, like doing something like this. Right? I'm still mostly using that thumb style. And man, if I tried to strum this, it wouldn't work very well. Work better than I thought, but it's still like with that strumming, I don't think that fits the vibe of the song quite as well as being just really melodic with the thumb, right? But that's kind of how I would do it. It's the same logic. The left hand or the fretting hand is exactly the same. It's just starting to add maybe some of that picking technique and some of that strumming technique as you're going through. But it's a really good example of a song that's using, just the basic concepts that these 3 things work with, right? It's that chord melody with the thumb, finger picking fills, and then strumming. So looks like Connie says, I love that arrangement. It was just released yesterday and so pretty. Yeah, it's a beautiful melody. Pcash says, I think that sounds really good. Amazing how fast you can improvise. It's just practice with this and being put on the spot. So Pcash also says, jazz version, yeah, it definitely is jazzier when you start adding some of that strumming. And Connie says, worked better than I thought. LOL, you never know till you try it. That actually might be the biggest, the most important thing said in this lesson. A lot of times when you think an arrangement's going to work, it doesn't. And just as many times you think an arrangement's not going to work and it works beautifully, right? So yeah, you never know unless you try it. And Zill says it's cool how you can just wing it and to add layers on demand. And that's just from doing so many different arrangements, right? All of these things that I was just doing, I've done in so many other arrangements that it's just kind of intuitive to me. And if you got another ukulele player to do what they would do, they do different things than I would, and we could both learn from each other of new things to do, and the kind of what comes intuitively to each person. And the best players in the world just have the most accessible intuition, if that makes sense. They can do the most variations to those spur of the moment things. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this lesson working with the 3 different layers of this, and hope that you can take this concept and apply it to some of your own arranging. Remember, the golden rule is if it sounds good, it's right. So as long as what you're working with sounds good, keep with it. And I will see you guys very soon. And again, stay tuned for the new time as we're going through with these live lessons moving forward. So thank you so much. Have a great one. I'll talk to you guys soon.